Hello, hello, hello. Good evening. Welcome to anyone who's joining us live or in the playback. It's me again, Chelsea, and I have got the pleasure of being joined by the lovely Adrian.
Hello.
Welcome to the channel.
Thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
That is no problem at all. Um, how is it over there? I know you mentioned that you've got scheduled power outages.
Yeah,
What's that?
Ecuador is a bit of a hot mess right now. So
Um,
basically, like a drought caused collapse of the energy infrastructure.
oh wow.
Because most of it is hydroelectric, so the
Mhm.
dams are like dried out and everything.
Wow.
So yeah, every day we have like 8 to 10 hours of power cuts.
Wow.
So I knew it's like we start at 3, and our
Yeah.
power comes back at 3. So just have to restart my modem, and then we can go.
And we're here, and it's
We're
fine.
here. Exactly. Exactly. We
That is
figured it out. So,
exactly. That's the main thing. It's
yeah.
it's anticipation, as we said. A couple of minutes late, people are anticipating it. That's all.
Yeah. Like good storytellers, just build a little bit of tension.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what it is. So just gonna jump right in, obviously. You are an indie author, which is fantastic. I applaud anyone who writes a book in any way, shape, or form that they manage to publish. What inspired you to become an author, or have you always wanted to be an author?
Um, it's been a bit of like a ebbs and flows type journey.
Mm-hmm.
I'll show everyone my book first of all. This is Mushroom Blues, my
Yes.
debut novel, which came out last March.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's
it's
a Spitfire
been
finalist.
yeah. Well, thanks
Can't miss
thanks to you and
out.
the team at Fantasy Book Critics. So thank you. I appreciate
No
that.
problem.
um, but it's been kind of like a part of my life ever since I've been young. Like I love
Mhm.
reading and I love storytelling, but my journey with storytelling went from and then back to art and now back to writing. So I
Wow.
had time when I was doing like fan comics when I was in like elementary and middle school,
Hmm.
and then I did a lot of art in high school, and then I went to university for English lit, and then I was like back into writing, and then I went to Berlin and became a tattoo artist and was
Oh my
really into
gosh.
art, and then I came to Ecuador, and then my son was born, and I was like, I'm gonna start a podcast and write because I can do both of those things from home for free.
Well,
So
exactly. Well, the writing easy. Is the podcast easy with the power outages?
we're managing. It's like we
There you go.
record twice a month,
Okay.
so
There you
yeah.
go.
So it's not like burdensome in any way.
Yeah.
We've just been able to manage to schedule with our guests and figure it out as we go. Um,
That's
so
what
luckily, like
all you
some of our
can do.
guests are friends, so we're able to
Yeah.
manage, like shoot them a message and be like, hey, can we delay by an hour?
Yeah.
Or could we postpone until such and such date? But it's worked out completely fine
That's amazing.
as it's been happening. So
So you are a very multi-talented person, is what I'm hearing.
I dabble in many things. Yeah,
Well, why not? It keeps everything fresh, doesn't it? That's the
exactly.
point. So
Yes.
obviously, Mushroom Blues is your debut novel. You've chosen to publish it the indie way.
Hmm.
Was that always your plan?
No, podcasting totally changed my mind on that.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Uh, Before I started SFF Addicts,
Hmm.
I had planned to go the traditional route of finding an agent and doing that whole thing,
Hmm.
pitching my book to an editor and whatnot. But when I started the podcast, it was with the intention of just learning from as many authors as I could in
Hmm.
a way that was like, seemingly more professional than just like, I'm going to write you an email and be like, can you give me advice for free?
Yeah.
Like, I'll start a podcast and then you can give me advice for free, which I can then share with other people.
Yes.
Um, and I mean, you know how it goes too. It's like interviewing people is kind of like a win-win-win for everybody involved.
Hmm.
You know, the
Yeah.
person being interviewed, the interviewer, the people watching, everyone's able to have an opportunity to learn something. And
Yeah.
from the first guest that I had, which was Hugh Howey and Duncan Swan,
Big names.
talking talking about. I mean, they run SPSFC, which is like
Yeah.
SPFBO for sci-fi,
That's fine. Yeah.
and Hugh is probably like one of the three authors that made me aware of what self-publishing is.
Oh, okay.
Like I'd read Wool well over a
Yes.
decade ago,
Yeah, I've got that on my
and
shelves.
it was like,
Somewhere.
yeah, it was crazy to just think like, wait, he published this himself, and then
Yeah.
eventually, obviously, it got picked up for print rights by bigger publishers, and
Hmm.
that whole story with Hugh. But
Yeah.
from the very first episode, it was basically, Hugh telling Hugh and Duncan talking about how self-publishing was kind of the future of the publishing industry. Um, and that hit me really hard. And then it was just a constant, not necessarily repetition
Hmm.
of words, but like repetition of themes where it's like more and more authors were saying self publishing, there are
Yep.
big things happening there. Traditionally published authors who are going hybrid, self
Hmm.
published authors who get so big that they end up getting traditionally published. So
Yeah.
there's just a lot of weight that I started to put into the self publishing bucket.
Mm.
And it got to a point where I was like, I'd been, I'd finished my first draft of Spore City, which is the book that I wrote before Mushroom Blues.
Hmm.
And then I took a break from it, and my break was writing Mushroom Blues. And that when I started writing that book, I took the outline and then revised it, and then started writing the first draft, and then like during that process realized this is probably better suited for self-publishing.
Hmm.
Contacted a cover artist, Felix Ortiz, and just started planning.
Yeah.
And it just suited me so much better because of the things that I've done in my adult life where I've rarely been employed by other people,
Hmm.
and was sort of like dabbling in entrepreneurial
Yeah.
pursuits again and again. It's like
Hmm.
music journalism, tattooing,
Yeah.
podcasting, all these different things. So self-publishing really suited my, I guess, like work ethic in that
Hmm.
sense. And yeah, I just rolled with it. And honestly, looking back, I'm like, that's the best decision I could have made.
Well, I completely agree. I was going to say, I talk to a lot of people. I kind of do. I've spoken to many authors, interviewing and just in general, mainly indie authors, and just the freedom as well that they get is something that you don't necessarily get in traditional publishing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was talking to, well, recently Stephen Orion,
Yeah.
who is a traditionally published author
Yeah. He
historically.
just put out his first
Yeah,
self-published book. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And he was like, oh well, I just thought it would be, he can do his thing traditionally, and then he can do his separate thing self-published, and you can work out your own timelines. And it sounds like you've got an amazing work ethic, anyways.
A bit
Just
of a
to,
workaholic, but
yeah,
yeah.
well, work ethic, workaholic. We label it
Yeah.
how we wish.
It's like tomato, tomato. It's
Exactly.
up to you.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? But I think the difference between traditional and self is now becoming more of just like a choice rather than
Mm-hmm.
you have to do it one way. There's obviously time way back when you'd go on and you'd look at indie books, and the indie books were seen or were lower quality than what
Mm-hmm.
was being traditionally published, whereas that's not so much the case anymore nowadays.
No, I think the that sort of barometer is, it definitely still exists.
Yeah, but
Like
it's
you
changed
go on
massively.
Amazon and you're gonna see some pretty crappy book
Yeah.
covers and everything. But the thing is, like, a lot of the people who are reading self-published books don't
Hmm.
always care about that stuff.
Yeah.
There is a certain element to it where, say, a reader exclusively reads on Kindle Unlimited
Hmm.
and they read in a certain genre. It's like if you're a self if you're like into self-published romance,
Yeah, just
your options are limitless,
yeah.
and you have the ability to just peruse all kinds of titles of varying quality. And if it kind of like scratches that itch, then it doesn't really matter what the cover looks like. But
Why
at the
exactly?
same time, there is a rising level of quality of self-published books, and people who are
Hmm.
more intentional, I think, about their decisions when it comes to how does a book look, how do they
Yeah.
market it, how is it formatted, how is it edited, how is it presented in general, just as like a packaged product.
Hmm.
It feels like the quality has risen exponentially over like the last 3-4 years.
Yeah, and the marketing's got so much better. I mean,
Yeah.
you yourself grew mushrooms out of your own book
And then ate them. Yeah.
and then ate them. That was pretty impressive.
Thank you. Thank you. No, it was really fun though. And my son got
Yeah.
involved. He was like, let's go into the back kitchen and like go like moisten our mushrooms. So he got like really into the mushroom project where we had to
Right.
keep them humid, and it's like
Yeah.
take the spray bottle and just like mist them
It's like a
a
family
couple times a day.
project.
Yeah, it was really lovely. And then we had like a burial where
Oh
it
no.
wasn't growing any more mushrooms, so we buried it in my backyard.
Maybe it'll grow more mushrooms out there.
That's the thing, maybe. Yeah.
You never know. So I have to ask, where did the inspiration for this book come from? Because this is, from my point of view, my reading history, such a unique world and such a unique, character makeup. You have a whole species of people who are like part mushroom, essentially.
Hmm.
Where did that spore from? Pardon the pun.
This is like a multi part
Go for it.
inspiration kind of thing. It's like on one hand, it's my love for mushrooms and how that has kind of developed over the course of my life.
Hmm.
And as I got into adulthood, dabbling more in like earlier on, it was like, oh, mushrooms look cool and weird and like
Yeah.
slimy and kind of gross in that fascinating way that things are when you're a kid.
Yep.
And then as I got older, doing more sort of like self-led research and reading about mushrooms, whether it was like the biology of them or foraging or cooking.
Hmm.
Like I love to cook, and so learning about mushrooms and how to incorporate them into dishes and stuff like that was also really interesting to me. And then psychedelics. So it's kind of like psychedelics and deeper relationship with the actual science of mushrooms.
Hmm.
And then when I moved to Berlin, discovering the work of Jeff Vandermeer and just being like completely
Yes.
enamored with books like Annihilation,
Hmm.
and Finch is one that really really stuck with me.
Okay.
Annihilation was the book that made me want to be a writer. Finch is the one that made me understand that world building didn't have to be so constrained.
Hmm.
And after reading Finch, my girlfriend and I went with some friends on a trip to Amsterdam, and it was raining for about like 2 out of the 5 days that we were there.
Sounds
So we
about
were like,
right.
oh shit, yeah. So, I mean, you understand, you're in the UK.
I am.
So we holed up in our Airbnb, and
Hmm.
I had my sketchbook with me, and I just started doodling and remembered Finch, and started drawing these like mushroom people tattoo designs. And I started developing that into like a series of tattoos
It's cool.
that eventually, like I have one on my leg that I tattooed myself, and I have friends and clients on like 4 different continents that I've tattooed mushroom people on. So there are like dozens of mushroom people tattoos around the world based
All because
on
of you.
my inspiration from Finch, and then turning that into a tattoo design kind of like series.
That's cool.
And once I started taking writing a little bit more seriously, I spent a lot of time world building, and Finch just like stuck with me. Like I couldn't get it out of my head.
Hmm.
So I started developing this world sort of in conversation with that book, which for anyone who hasn't read it, it's book 3 in the Ambergris trilogy. So book 1 is City of Saints and Madmen, then there's Shriek, and then Finch is the third one. But all of them are different.
Hmm.
Like City of Saints and Madmen is a short story collection. Shriek is like an epistolary novel between two like dysfunctional siblings set in the same world. And then Finch is like fantasy noir.
Hmm.
And in this world, it's like humans colonized uh, a part of this world that was occupied, that was, the habitat of these mushroom people, and then drove them underground.
Hmm.
And in Finch, those fungal people come back up to recolonize what was formerly taken over by the humans. But the way the fungal people are represented in that book was very, I felt one dimensional in terms of they felt like a hive mind. They
Hmm.
felt like kind of like a disembodied evil, if you get what I mean,
Yeah.
where the humans had lots of individuality and personality, but all the fungal people, the gray caps is what they were called, they felt
Mhm.
very similar. And so I kind of wanted to create a world where I was in conversation with that, where I gave more individuality and more agency to the fungal people, and that just led to this like 2 years of research and illustration and world building and coming up with this world
Mhm.
and realizing that the vague idea of a story that I had planned for this was pretty crap. So I tossed that aside and started pulling in the genres that I really love and just doing this like genre mashup in this world, but
Mhm.
with genres that I felt were much more suited to telling an interesting story, telling an entertaining story, and telling a story that
Yeah.
I could actually write from start to finish.
Fair enough. I mean, that's really interesting. I obviously I've read Mushroom Blues. I read it for Spiffbo, um, and my team were the one that obviously put it through to finalists, as you mentioned it earlier. And I will say it's so well written. Your world
Thank you.
is so unique, and I really appreciated that. Also, I like that within this book you've got a main character who is struggling with her past, but also struggling with because obviously, as you know, you wrote the book. There's a
No,
lot
tell me
of
more.
hatred between and like racism essentially
Mm-hmm.
between the humans and the mushroom people. Um, so having a main character who's not only struggling with her past, but having that mingle in with trying to help other people that she also doesn't see as equals was
Mm-hmm.
really interesting to read from. How did you write that so well?
I honestly don't know. It's kind of one of those things where I was like, uh, I came into it with like certain intentions,
Mhm.
and Henrietta, especially, I think like her and Koji were the two characters.
Mm.
Henrietta is the main character. She's a human homicide detective,
Yep.
and then Koji Nameko is a mushroom person. They're the Japanese.
Mhm.
He's a beat cop, and he's like the only fungal person on the police force. And so for Henrietta, it's kind of like a big struggle for her to kind of deal with the fact that she's in this place in the city of Neokanoko, which is
Mhm.
the capital city of the Hopanese. It's like a mushroom metropolis, is kind of how I describe it.
Yep.
And she's been exiled there. So it was kind of like an ultimatum given to her. It's like
Mhm.
imprisonment or exile.
Yeah.
And for her, it's kind of this like really shitty situation because that exile becomes a purgatory of sorts where it's like, A, like you said, she's dealing with the stuff that she's done in the past. You know, she's an
Mhm.
ex alcoholic, and dealing with tragedies that she inflicted upon her own family. But at the same time, she's mycophobic and she hates mushrooms. And then here she is in this city full of mushroom people
Yep. And
trying,
spores.
yeah,
Spores
and spores
everywhere.
everywhere, and just trying to deal with that day to day struggle. And
Mm.
then because of the murder that she's tasked with investigating, which is like first paragraph of the book, there's a murder, so
Yep.
it's
No
not like a
spoilers here.
spoiler or anything. She is forced to work with Koji in order to
Mm.
investigate this murder. And so
Yep.
that really puts her into like this pressure cooker of confrontation,
Yep.
not just with her external surroundings, but also with her internal struggles. And so for
Yep.
me, so much of what happens with Henrietta, so much of what happens with Koji was very much like I do outline and I do plan a lot of what I'm going to write, but
Mhm.
so much of what they went through was spontaneous just based on what they were kind of telling me as the story was
Okay.
going along. So
Yeah.
it's kind of this like weird creative, like nebulous gray area
Yeah.
where the process itself tends to inform a lot of what happens, and
Yeah.
the characters kind of like come alive and say like, hey, that direction doesn't work for me, this one might be more fun or darker
Yeah.
or more difficult to deal with.
Mhm.
And in my case, like my gut told me to kind of like lean into more of those like spontaneous occurrences.
Yeah. I agree with you. Koji
Hi,
does roll.
how you doing, Aaron?
Koji was my favorite character
Yeah.
in the whole book. Um, there were times within obviously watching him and Henrietta react that I want to shake her and be
Yeah.
like, he's trying to help you. Stop being so difficult. Please stop.
Yeah. But that's like that relationship ends up becoming such a core of the book
Yeah.
because, you know, it would have been more it would have been more challenging for me to write if I didn't have like the perfect foil for Henrietta.
Mhm.
And Koji just became the perfect foil, where it's
Yeah.
like he's so pragmatic, and but at
Mhm.
the same time he's like so much more, um, I would say like spiritual and
Yeah.
kind of like emotionally confident in himself, despite the fact that he's also going through a lot of troubles
Mhm.
and you know, it comes to light over the course of the book, like these challenges that he himself is confronting. But I feel
Yeah.
like he's so much more sure of himself than Henrietta.
Yeah.
And that kind of created this much more engaging, like Sherlock Watson dynamic, even though neither of them are like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
cookie cutter representations of either Sherlock Holmes or
Yeah.
Watson.
No, I get that. And I think as well with Koji, the impression that I got was the reason he was so much more almost sure of himself was because he's dealt with this. Like
Mm-hmm.
they'd be in the police precinct and people would be making comments about him and clearly showing their hatred for him and his kind.
Mm-hmm.
And it was almost like him being like, what can you do to me? Like I've
Yeah.
I've lived this my whole life. There's nothing new. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
with Henrietta, it was more like the impression of obviously this tragedy happened, and that was almost like part of the turning point for her. Like now I am actually like hated and exiled,
Mm-hmm.
and she has to come to terms with that over time rather than just like growing up as being the bad guy,
Yeah. Exactly.
which was very interesting to read from. I really enjoyed the hive mind esque relationship that your characters did have, though, although they're not 100% just one mind and they are
Yeah.
individual. The fact that they can communicate is very interesting.
Yeah, and I
And
think that's kind of like the most fantastical aspect of this book,
yeah.
where it's like, yes, it is like science fiction in a lot of ways, but it's also kind of like
Mm-hmm.
urban fantasy, not in like an urban fantasy sense of there's werewolves and you know the menagerie of monsters that people are used to, but it's
Yeah,
an urban setting that
has
has
fantastical
fantastical
elements.
elements. And
100%.
so the mushroom people, like what I'd read in Finch and thought was super cool was the ways in
Mm-hmm.
which the fungal people, the gray caps, kind of communicated with each other very
Yeah.
much in the ways that you'd expect a group of organisms linked through something like mycelium would communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, that is like the most sci-fi thing ever, where
Yes.
you basically have like a group of people who have a form of telepathic communication with each
Yeah.
other. Um, and that's something that's like a theme that is really, really big in cyberpunk,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's telepathic communication through, you know, like, or like you see like what Elon Musk is doing with Neuralink, like that kind of thing, or
Yeah.
through nanotechnology, or through, um, you know, some form of futuristic internet networking
Yeah.
that is then infused into each individual human being.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it's like it's all biological. It's all through mycelial networks that are, you know, within the city of Neokanoko,
Mm-hmm.
within the fungal people, beneath the ground, going all across this country. And so for me, it was really cool to be able to think of ways that were, a little bit different in terms of like how would these people communicate. Of course, they would have verbal language because they are,
Yeah.
you know, part of them is like part human,
Mm-hmm.
you know, sort of in this hybrid way. But at the same time, with all of this sort of like mycological aspect to their being,
Mm-hmm.
how would they communicate? And it to me, it's like telepathic communication can become like such a cheat in so many ways.
Yeah, because it's like
Where
I know what you're thinking, and
right,
then yeah.
it's like there's way too much transparency there,
Yeah.
and that was getting a little bit too much into like hive mind type vibes.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, it's like they can communicate with each other verbally. They can, through the mycelial network that they call
Mhm.
the fungal net, they can like emote to each other. So instead of being
Mhm.
like telepathic, they're more like empathic,
Yeah.
and they're able to read each other's emotions and each other's intentions and things like that. But then I kind of put a twist on it and making it more like a social network where it's like
Yeah.
you go onto Instagram and you can see people's past memories, like their past photos. And so it's like
Mhm.
there are ways in which the fungal people can interact with each other and share lived experiences.
Mhm.
And at the same time, it's like having a social media profile where you're like you can obscure yourself to other people, like you can block them,
Yeah.
much the way Elon Musk doesn't want people to be able to do on X this week. But there are ways of like obfuscating your intentions and things like
Mm.
that. So there's like interesting points of tension there because someone could be obscuring something and another fungal person wouldn't know what they're obscuring,
Mhm.
and that person could mislead them by telling them something verbally as
Yeah.
opposed to showing them the reality, the truth behind like what they're feeling and what their intentions are. So
Mm.
that was like a good story mechanism as well.
Yes, because I think, especially because one of our main characters is Hoppanese, if they were just able to instantly read anyone they were interrogating, this story would have been a lot shorter, like
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
20
And more
pages.
and just like and way more boring, you know?
Yeah.
So I think setting limitations, that's something about like fantasy and science fiction where limitations actually do co- they allow for more opportunities, which
Yeah.
sounds kind of paradoxical, but having those limitations in place, it's like Brandon Sanderson and the way he talks about magic systems,
Mhm.
creating that set of rules, creating a
Yeah.
system that makes sense allows you to apply that logic to any given situation. And
Mhm.
so having that set of rules established makes it a lot easier to think of like, here's this scene that I want to do, or this like chapter, or this sequence of events, or whatever.
Yeah.
How can I apply this logical system to everything that's going on
Mhm.
in order to make it more entertaining and more full of conflict and more um, like an emotional roller coaster kind of thing. And
Yeah.
so it's like if that stuff was more vague, then for me personally, it's a lot harder to figure out like how do I apply that to this situation and not have it break the continuity or the logic of everything I've said before.
Yeah. That makes sense. I like. I think the engaging part of this book for me that was also done very well is it's underneath everything else. It is a mystery at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day. You've got a crime to solve, and you're watching these characters go through and solve these horrible crimes that are being committed. Did you know at the end who you want? Obviously, spoiler free. Did you know at the end how you wanted the book to end, or because obviously you mentioned that you partially outlined, but you also kind of
Mm-hmm.
pants in a sense. Did you know where your end point was, or did that kind of just come out of the whole writing process?
There were certain things that happened in the end that were a bit spontaneous, but like the ending,
Mm-hmm.
I knew it's like it's mentioned throughout the
Yep.
whole book, but like the Fuyu Lantern Festival,
Mm-hmm.
that I knew was like my
Your
endpoint.
ending point.
Um, but obviously, that's like there are things that happen leading up to and just after the Fuyu Lantern Festival.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those things were a bit more spontaneous.
Okay.
But I think it's like how people got to that point
Yes.
that changed along the way, especially Henrietta, where
Yeah.
it's like her personal journey.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it is a murder mystery,
Yeah.
um, and I think for me it has like the structural framework of a murder mystery, but it is
Mm-hmm.
also a character study in Henrietta and her
Yes.
kind of like getting to a certain point where I needed her to be for the rest of the series. Because it's like I don't want to have like because there are 4 books in this series, and I didn't want to have every single book being like her and Koji hating each other, or like
Yes.
her and Koji not being friends. I knew
Yeah.
that so much of this series is about Henrietta and Koji being friends.
Hmm.
Although, like within any friendship, there's conflict and there are ups and downs.
Yes.
So it's not going to be like we're besties forever. Um, but I wanted Henrietta to be like in a certain headspace by the end
Hmm.
of this book, such that she would be ready to do the things that I have planned for books 2, 3, and 4. Um, and so getting her to that point,
Hmm.
um, I knew there were like things that she had to overcome in order to get there.
Yeah.
And I knew that the Fuyu Lantern Festival was kind of like the climax of it all. Um,
Okay.
but it was really fun to see like how things kind of veered off of my plan, my outline, and all that.
Yeah. How much chaos you can get your characters to get into. I like
And
it.
chaos is the best when it comes to stories. So
Well, I am just chaos in most terms
just
of the word.
chaos incarnate. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit, a little bit. So my next question was going to be how many books are in the series. So obviously you've said
Yeah.
4. Do
Yeah.
you have a plan for when you're going to release them? Obviously you can adhere to your own schedule because you're
Yeah.
self-published. But the key question? When are we getting the next one?
Well, people are going to get the start of a different series in the Fungal verse before they get book 2.
Okay.
Um, and that's going to be Spore City. So that was like the book that I wrote before this,
Mhm.
and I'm currently like tearing the shit out of that thing just to like it's a crazy experience to write something and then take a break from it
Yeah.
and write something else and then come back to that thing you wrote before and realize like,
Mhm.
man, I got so much better. And there
But
are just
that's
so many.
good.
Yes, it is a very good thing, and I'm happy that I wrote and released Mushroom Blues before Spore City.
Mhm.
um, so people will get Spore City first. That'll come out at some point next year.
Mhm.
I've already got the cover art, which is really exciting.
Amazing.
Once again from Felix Ortiz.
Mhm.
I have him tapped for like the entire Fungal verse. Uh, so
Consistency. We like
yeah,
it.
so it's like Spore City is book 1 in the Kanoko trilogy,
Mhm.
and then after that I'm gonna go right to book 2 in the Hoffman Report, and
Mhm.
then I'm gonna jump back and forth between them until
Okay.
they're finished, and then I'm gonna start releasing separate like non-fungal verse stuff as
Mhm.
well as other series set in the fungal verse. So like go back 250 years and have more like fungal samurai epic.
Wow.
Then like a standalone
Mhm.
set during the Spore War, which is referenced a ton in Mushroom Blues and is kind of like the setup for Mushroom Blues.
Yeah.
So I've got a standalone idea for that. So lots of different things that I'm going to play around with in the fungal verse, and then other stuff as well. So yeah, hopefully a year from now
Mhm.
you'll have Spore City, and very soon after that you'll have book 2 in the hall.
Yeah.
I think I froze for a second.
No, I'm not sure if it's you or me.
Okay, well we're back.
That's fine. We're back.
Yeah.
So either way, we've got a lot of stuff coming.
Yep.
This sounds like you've got many, many years planned of work ahead of yourself, which is, again, I mean, you said at the start, workaholic.
Yeah. But also just like over planner. So um it
But that's fine.
yeah, it
It
like
means that,
gives me like relief and creative release when I'm able to have some idea of like what's coming kind of thing.
yeah.
So knowing that like this is what I want to do in the fungal verse,
Mhm.
and this is the stuff that I want to do outside of this,
Yeah.
that a helps me kind of like refine the ideas that are actually worth pursuing,
Yeah.
and then b to kind of have like a roadmap in mind, uh, just really helps sort of like
Yeah.
the creative process, as well as like Aaron was mentioning, uh, with KDP, publishing a book is easy, writing a book is hard. However, marketing is even harder. So it's like,
Yeah. 100%.
as a self-published author, just having to wear those different hats is
Yeah.
very difficult. And it took me like months to get out of Mushroom Blues, like marketing space. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it was a struggle for me to transition from that back to just like writing and creating stuff.
Well, yeah,
which
because
was
marketing
very
in itself,
frustrating.
yeah,
But
marketing in itself is a full-time job. Like
oh my god, yeah.
when you traditionally publish, you literally have someone who sits and reads it, you have someone who proofreads it, you have someone who markets your book,
Yep.
and then you as an author, obviously you have many things to do, I'm sure.
And there are a lot more traditional authors now who have to do a lot of marketing themselves
Yeah.
or feel in, like that they have
Hmm.
to. But
Yeah.
yeah, but as an indie author, it's like you don't do
Everything.
this.
Yeah.
It's like if you don't do this, then it's like your book has
You're shouting into the void.
has much less chance to
Yeah.
actually make it. And it's like now looking back
Hmm.
since launch, I can see like, oh, the marketing I did worked.
Yeah.
You know, which is
Hmm.
kind of, it's like a good feeling to be able to look at that in hindsight and think like not everything that I did was just for nothing, was in vain. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
I put in a crap ton of effort and
Yes.
now like I'm seeing the fruits of that labor
Yeah.
kind of starting to appear.
100%. And if you put as much time as I'm sure any author does into their book, you want it to do well. So
Mm-hmm.
that's gonna, if you, it is really sad to think. Obviously, I love books. I'm a bit of a dragon hoarder myself. But there are so many amazing books constantly coming out now, both traditionally and indie, that if you don't market your book, it gets lost because
Mm-hmm.
there's so much constantly coming out, no matter when you release,
Exactly.
which is sad. But at the same time, I think being a part of this community and getting yourself out there is really helpful to getting your name out there, because
Mm-hmm.
this community is very much, we are very inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to think so. What I have experienced is that.
My
And
rule
when
is
you,
basically like if you're not an asshole, you'll be fine. You know.
exactly, and I feel like authors now, because I talk to lovely indie authors like yourself and traditionally published ones, they want to interact with the readers,
Mm-hmm.
and having that relationship and having social media that actually kind of brings you to your readership as well makes that a little bit easier. Not
Yeah.
necessarily 100% easier, but a little bit easier.
Yeah. And I mean, thank you to Future Fiction Reviews who said that
Hello,
Mushroom Blues is my favorite book of the year. That's a sci-fi book, at least. Thank you so much. Um, I think as an indie author, it's like there are certain. I think the most difficult part of it is like visibility
yeah.
and how do you how do you market something to someone when they can't actually see it?
Hmm.
Um, I mean, they can see it, but it's like it's not a tangible thing that they could hold in their hand. There's such a
Yes.
different feeling of going to a bookstore and perusing and just coming across something that you
Yeah.
find really interesting. To think
Hmm.
like, oh, like I saw this book cover on a bookshelf and it just like it
Yeah.
called to me. We don't have that.
No.
So there are a lot of outside of the box things that indie authors have to do,
Hmm.
or they have to get into the sphere of like paid ads and
Yeah.
dealing with, you know, the fluctuations in advertising algorithms on Amazon and on Facebook
Yeah.
and all that, which isn't for me. Like I dabbled in it a little bit, but like I stopped after a very short
Yeah.
period of time, and all of my marketing has been just word of mouth
Hmm.
and me doing my own thing and interviewing with awesome people like you.
Thank you.
And I think there are a variety of ways that authors can kind of get their books out there.
Hmm.
Not necessarily to like guarantee someone buys your book, but at the very least, they might stumble across it
Hmm.
in a situation where they never would have otherwise.
Yeah.
And you know, just this week it was like a crazy feeling for me. Like a reader was in a store in Amsterdam, like a
I saw
bookstore.
that.
Like that was just crazy to me. It was
Yeah.
like I've been to Amsterdam once, like that
Hmm.
trip that I mentioned before, but I don't know anybody there.
Yeah.
Um, and so this reader tagged me on Instagram, taking a picture of their book at this bookstore in
Hmm.
Amsterdam. And not only like was it like a physical copy in this bookstore, but also it was like a staff pick. And I was like, what the hell is going on? It's
I know.
so surreal to think like I'm in Ecuador and
Hmm.
here's this person in Amsterdam at a bookstore, and someone at that bookstore, I kind of like laid it out for my wife. I was like,
Yeah.
someone at that bookstore stumbled across my book on the
Hmm.
internet somehow and decided to order it into the bookstore.
Yep.
Then they ordered it into the bookstore and read it,
Hmm.
and then liked it so much that they made it a staff pick.
Yeah.
And then this reader stumbled across it at this bookstore and tagged me in a photo of it. Like the chain of events is just
It's crazy.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
So the fact that indie authors can now do this,
Hmm.
the fact that indie authors can be stocked in bookstores.
Yeah.
Barnes and Noble in the States is like is tricky
I think it's the
in
same
a
for
lot of ways.
Waterstones in the
Yeah,
UK. I
Waterstones
found,
is very difficult. I don't know how Goldsboro is, but I think
I don't
the
know.
UK, yeah, the UK is
Yeah.
like very similar to Barnes and Noble, where there's like a lot of gatekeeping
Hmm.
in terms of who can be in the store. But I found
Yeah.
Indigo. I found Indigo, which is it's like a
Canada.
conglomerate in Canada. It's
Hmm.
Indigo Chapters Coles is like three bookstores that became
Yeah.
one. That I got to know one of the consignment buyers for a store in Ontario,
Hmm.
and she's really really lovely, and we just talked over Instagram, and I asked like, would you be interested in,
Yeah.
like, I'm going to send you a copy of Mushroom Blues,
Hmm.
and if you'd be interested in stocking it in the store. And so she was able to actually just like go into the system for the entire company across the country
Wow.
and basically um, make it possible for that book to be ordered into any of the stores in the country. So just one person can make
Yeah.
that decision for a
Hmm.
single book to be, not necessarily that it's guaranteed to be stocked in every store in the country,
No, but it's
but
able to be.
yeah,
Yeah.
any consignment buyer, any employee could order that book into one of their stores across Canada. So it's
That's
like the fact
amazing.
that that can happen now,
Hmm.
it's like, man, the possibilities are so much more endless for indie
100%.
authors. And that's like the biggest reason most authors go trad now is
Hmm.
for distribution. The
Yeah.
fact that your book could be distributed, that not could be, but like will be distributed to the majority of bookstores across any given country.
Hmm.
That is the major reason people go trad now.
Yeah.
Um, there are obviously a bunch of other reasons,
Hmm.
but that distribution is like the big selling point
Yeah.
that traditional publishers have for their authors. They also have marketing, but I think that's a bit bullshit
Yeah.
because I see very mismatched marketing budgets, and I see some
Hmm.
authors whose marketing budgets almost completely disappear, or their marketing plans that they're pitched end up not happening,
Yeah.
and they end up having to do a lot of the marketing themselves anyways.
Hmm.
And so distribution ends up becoming that main selling point of going
Yeah.
trad. But if indie authors are able to start breaking into that, where we can get our book stocked
It's
in a major
amazing.
retailer in a place like Canada,
Hmm.
then, or like Travis Baldry was able
Yeah.
to kind of, not him personally, but like employees at Barnes and Noble were able to kind of like bend the system in order
Yeah.
to get his book stocked in their stores.
Hmm.
So the landscape is completely changing, but I think it's a very exciting time
It
to
really
be an indie
is.
author.
I mean, I've only found one, I think, indie book in a Waterstones, and that was Ryan Carhill.
Yeah.
I think it was the second book of Darkness and
I
Light,
know
and I
Michael R. Miller has been able to get some of his books
yeah,
into Waterstones as well. Yeah.
yes, I'm still yet to find one in store. I do own a copy, but I'm yet to find one in store. But I remember messaging Ryan and being like, "Your book's in Waterstones," obviously because he's over in New Zealand, and
Yeah.
he was like, "Really? Is it?" I was like, "Yeah, here's the photo." It's fantastic, and I think I have heard about the marketing budgets being cut. Unfortunately, I spoke to R.R. Verdi a few
Mm-hmm.
months ago, and we were talking about how like his first book he got physical arcs to send out to people. His second book's recently come out, didn't have physical arcs anymore. Obviously, that's not the be all and end all, but that is still quite a nice thing to be able to
Right.
send out to people, and it's something.
I think it means more than people realize as
Yeah,
well.
and it's also something. It sounds so insignificant potentially, but the the idea of being sent an arc and having those people take photos of said arc
Mm-hmm.
in front of bookshelves or whatever, that also gains momentum and gives you that view. I am also guilty of this when it's an e-arc. I forget sometimes to take photos because,
Yep.
especially, I mean, it's changed now. Kindle have now got a color version, but I have I have an old
Here's
Kindle.
my lovely black and white, like, or it's not even
Yeah,
black and white. It's like
very
fuchsia,
yeah.
almost like, or
But
not
all the
fuchsia.
covers are
What?
then like grayscaled, so you're
Yeah,
like, it
yeah,
doesn't have the same impact,
yeah.
which is sad.
Um,
But you know, obviously talking about visibility as well, you entered Spiffbo this year,
mhm,
which is, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm sure you do know if you're watching this, self-published fantasy blog off, which was created by Mark Lawrence, who himself is traditionally published. At, I don't
but
know if he
he's hybrid though. He
is he
he self
hybrid. I
he
was about
self
to say,
publishes his own stuff. Yeah,
yeah,
mostly like tie-in stuff to his main series
ah,
that he like self publishes and
yeah,
releases on the side.
alongside.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But yeah, he created Spiffbo, and obviously the rules change. It's become very popular. Um, I think this is my second year in being a judge for it, which is it's great fun, and it is reading the books that you wouldn't necessarily pick up, or being
Hmm.
able to bump the books that you were thinking of reading further up your TBR,
Hmm.
which I'm sure is a problem for all of us. What made you submit to Spiffbo this year?
Because my book came out, and why not?
Why not?
It's pretty much my attitude. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Um, yeah, because I contemplated beforehand, like, is this fantasy enough
Hmm.
to submit?
Yeah.
Um, but I talked to my friend Alexander Darwin, who was a finalist in the past,
Hmm.
um, and there was like, I'm not going to say a big kerfuffle, but like, there was a kerfuffle around his book, whether it was fantasy enough, because his is
Hmm.
like, it's like science fantasy.
Right.
Um, so it's kind of like blurring the lines between sci-fi and
Hmm.
fantasy, which I feel like my book does in a lot of ways as well.
Hmm.
And he said like just do it because like what are you gonna lose, you know?
True.
So I did, and this year was a bit. I mean, it was
It was.
past years have been they've been a shit show for different reasons
Hmm.
because the window for applying was like a set time and it
Yeah.
was first come first serve,
Yeah.
but there were certain people in certain time zones that would be screwed over by
Yes.
that. So it's like if you're in Australia or New Zealand, it would
Yeah.
be like 2 or 3 in the morning or something like some
Yeah.
absurd hour that would be really difficult for you
Hmm.
to, it's like you have to wake up in the middle of the night just to apply for Spiffbo.
Yeah.
So this year they did the lottery system,
Yeah. So it was open
which
24 hours, and
yeah,
then 300 books got randomly picked,
yeah,
and then we sieved through to check that the books met the specifications. So
hmm,
no sequels, um, all those fun rules that Mark lists very clearly on the
yeah,
website, um, and then got the final 300. I know a lot of people were very disappointed this year.
yeah. There
I
there was like
don't.
a there was like a I think the hashtag was like
Swift no.
SPF no, Spiff
Yeah.
no or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, which is like, yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I was talking about it yesterday. I recorded with the guys from Tudor Ramble,
Hmm.
and Spiffbo came up during the panel, and it's kind of like, my attitude towards these things is like just try and give it a shot, and if it happens, it happens, and if
Yeah.
good things happen, then awesome.
Yep.
Like making it to the finals, sweet. Um, but I think the place that Spiffbo's at now
Hmm.
in like the fantasy zeitgeist, in the self-publishing zeitgeist,
Hmm.
it's gotten to a point where I think people are putting like a bit too much weight into it,
Yes.
where it's kind of like taking a lot of the fun out of the competition.
Yeah. And I feel
And
like with the Spiff no, and the no matter what happens, and I like to think I'm not biased because I don't. I get to read fun books. I've got nothing
yeah,
like out of it apart from reading the fun books, which I love. But I feel like no matter what happens, you're never going to please everyone, anyways. Like
mm-hmm,
that's just my mom always told me that when I was
yeah,
growing up. You're never going to make everyone happy, so do what you think is best.
mm-hmm,
And I think that's what they're trying to do. Um, Whether it'll be reshuffled again for next year, I don't know. I mean,
Mhm.
I think the only way that we could potentially make it fairer is to make it bigger, but then you counteract what you're doing because you're
Right.
then letting more books in, and then it's not the
But then
same.
it's also like how do you I mean you'd have to add judging teams, you'd have to do
Yeah,
so much more.
yeah,
And it's already like a monumental task
yeah.
for Mark cuz like now that like after I made it to the finals, you know,
Mhm,
Mark messaged me and congratulated me and we've talked a little bit here and there since,
mhm.
but it's like he's very involved in
Yes,
this.
he is, and he
And
watches
so
every video. If you
yep.
put up on YouTube that it's like a Spiffbo thing,
Hmm.
he will watch it and he will comment on it.
Yep.
And he's very involved and he only wants the best
Yeah.
for authors, which is very admirable.
And so for him, it's
Um,
like I know it's a lot of work. For the judges, it's a lot of work.
mm,
And I think, you know, not to say like the system is perfect, but obviously there needs to be like a lot of consideration about how to refine
yeah,
it in order to make it
mm,
feel fairer to
yes,
everybody.
I get that.
And you know, like I obviously like I'm in a privileged position because I made it in
Yeah.
and I made it through the semifinals and I made it into the finals.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I think um, I have a very pragmatic attitude about what Spiffbo
Mhm.
is for me, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not like the be all end all, you
No.
know? Like if I lost, you know, if like I didn't make it to the top spot or something like that,
Mhm.
I'm not going to be hurt. I'm going to be like,
No.
I released my debut novel and I made it to the top 10 in this competition of 300, which
Yeah.
for me is like hell yeah, you know, that's
Exactly.
amazing.
Yeah.
And getting to know the different finalists, there's just a very good sense of like camaraderie between everybody.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like I'll be happy whoever wins.
Yeah.
Um, and at the same time, I'm not viewing Spiffbo as like my be all end all launch pad
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
getting
Which
an
I think is a
agent
good way to
or getting a
be.
traditional publishing deal or blah blah blah. Like I know
Yeah.
authors like Alexander Darwin,
Yeah.
he you know, but he put in the effort outside of it.
Mhm.
It's like Spiffbo is not a guaranteed you're going to become the next ML Wang and
No.
sell, you know, however many copies of Sword of Kaigen and then
Mhm.
get signed for a trad print deal with damn I can't remember the name of
Orbit
her
does a
newest
lot
book.
of them.
I think this one
So
is with Del Rey, but
okay.
her newest book has like a traditional
Oh,
um,
ML1. Yes, Del Rey over
um,
Blood and Brighthaven.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that one, it's like it's no guarantee that if you become a Spiffbo winner,
Yeah.
that is going to happen to you. You
Mhm.
know, like I've talked to Josiah Bancroft about this and about how his path, very abnormal,
Yeah.
but also he put in the effort.
Mhm.
Alexander Darwin also put in the effort, sought representation with an agent,
Yeah.
sold this trilogy to Orbit. I've talked to so many different authors who've made it through, and then there's people like Rob Hayes who's like, I
Yeah.
love Self Pub, and I'm gonna stick with Self Pub.
Yes. But he
So
writes crazy anyways. I don't know how he
yeah,
does it.
so there is no guarantee. You know, it's like
Mm.
Spiffbo is a fun competition and is something I think is like a community building
Yeah.
uh, event.
It gets you out there, and
Yeah,
I think it.
is very good.
Yeah, and it's the same for Sphinx.
Yeah,
You're applying for Sphinx?
no, because that's novellas,
No,
but
not
SPSFC is the
Sphinx.
sci-fi one,
The
which I
sci-fi
also
one.
applied for. Yeah,
Yes.
and that
Yes.
one is like, hey, if I make it to the finals in that one as well, awesome. Like my first two
Yes.
guests on my podcast were Hugh and Duncan talking
Yeah.
about SPSFC and self-publishing, which would be like,
Mhm.
wow, crazy full circle to come
Yes.
back like years later
And go into it.
and go into it.
Mhm.
But it is not a be all end all. It's like
No.
it can be leverage for you, but it's
Yeah.
not any guarantee that anything is going to happen in the way that it has happened for other authors in the past. Because it's like,
Mm.
regardless, behind the scenes, those people wrote their asses off and they worked their
Yeah.
asses off in order to get to those points.
Yeah. I think it's the same for anything. All three competitions. I have now judged in all three competitions. I can't do that consistently. It's too much. I
Yeah.
started in
You say you're a not so secret bookaholic, but there are limits.
that really are. I started in SBFC,
Yeah.
and then I did Spiffbo and I did Sphinx last year, and I was like, I can't do it. It's not
Hmm.
sustainable.
Yeah.
It's not. I didn't think it was fair to every competition because I can't. I'm I'm not one of those. I know some fantastic readers who just read so fast. I am
Hmm.
not that person. I like to think I am, but I'm not. So I had to decide. I was like, where do I go?
Yeah.
And I have a really great team in Smithbow who took me in, and I was like, wow, I'll stay with you guys.
Yeah. Shout out to Mahir and everyone at Fantasy Book Critic.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Lucas for keeping us on track because
Yeah.
he is the magic man with the spreadsheet. Without him, we would be nothing.
But yeah, I think these things, it's like, take them with a grain of salt. Don't
Yeah.
expect it to be like the biggest possible thing to happen to your career. It's like,
Yeah.
if you release your book and you market your book and you continue to market your book and you know,
Hmm.
release more books and
Yeah.
sort of um, work to garner more visibility, then something like SPFBO is just a boon to what you're already
Yes.
doing. But don't put like all of your eggs in that basket and expect it to change your
Yeah.
entire career, because
Hmm.
like Mark posts graphics on like the SPFBO Facebook page, and it's like the ratings of SPFBO winners
Hmm.
before the competition
Yeah.
and after winning,
Hmm.
and some of them it's like skyrocketing, like sort of
Yeah.
Kaigan, but that was also in relation to ML Wang's marketing and word of
Yeah.
mouth
Yeah.
and the things that she was already doing to push that book farther and farther along. And then
Hmm.
there are some where it's like the difference isn't that significant.
Yeah.
So it all depends on your attitude and sort of like the weight that you put into this thing in terms of like what
Hmm.
is the value to you.
Yeah.
And for me personally, it's like the value is more community driven as opposed to anything else. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, cool, I get a badge, awesome,
Yeah.
but I'm not like, in the back of my mind viciously like hankering for for the winner spot or anything like that.
No. No. I think it doesn't reflect on you. Is like the thing that I would say about Smithbow is that it's not a reflection of you as an author personally. It is people like your book or not, and unfortunately, reading is subjective. So if you if you land with the
Mm-hmm.
right reader, you can go so far. But if you don't,
Yep.
then you might have problems. And I really like how Cassidy did it on her team. She has a group of people with her that read as well. And
Mm-hmm.
she gave every book to two reviewers so that it got
Okay.
two chances to become
Nice.
one of their semi-finalists, which I think is a really good way to do it. But unfortunately, I don't think, well, we don't do it in our team. I mean, a lot of my guys read probably every book. Again,
Mm-hmm.
they're fast readers. I can't do that,
Yeah.
unfortunately. I really wish I could. Maybe if you gave me more time, but that defeats the point. But having that, because a lot of people on my team had already read your book.
Yeah, so it's kind of
So,
like I know like Esme had read it,
yep,
Luke had read it,
yep,
Mahir read it as well.
yep. So there was
Um,
me and one other.
yeah.
Me and Chazzy hadn't read it. So they randomly generated and they went, one of you
Mm,
two is going to get it because none of
right.
us can read it.
Right.
So it unfortunately it's all just luck of the draw,
Mm,
but it's meant to be fun.
exactly. It's meant to be fun for the people judging. It's meant to be fun
Yes.
for the authors participating. And I think for me, it's been more fun like the less I think about it, because like if I just spend all my time tracking like what's going on with SPFBO, like
Hmm.
I would probably just be riddled with anxiety.
Yes. That's why
Um,
I like judging.
Yeah.
and not entering.
Yeah.
Don't have
So
that.
for me, like my rule of thumb has been like, don't pay attention to it until something happens.
Yeah,
And when it does, great,
fantastic.
you know?
So going, if you were to give advice to a new author, obviously we've spoken a lot about marketing today. What would be your advice if someone came to you and went, I really want to write a book. Don't know where to start. I don't know how to start. What would do you have advice that you would give, or what is something that has helped you
I think
become?
that stage is super difficult.
That's the
Um,
point. I'm asking the difficult
I know.
question.
God damn it. Jeez. From my perspective, it's like, so I'll make this kind of like a twofold thing.
Mhm.
If you are at a point where you want to start writing a book,
Mhm.
but you don't know what to write about, then
Mhm.
just start reading. I mean, I hope at that point you're already a voracious reader,
Yes.
such that you can figure out, like, I wouldn't have written Mushroom Blues if I hated murder mysteries and like police procedurals, you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's like I leaned into the genres that I really love.
Mhm.
So it's like I love crime fiction, I love crime thrillers, I love murder mysteries and that kind of stuff. So it's like that feels like something that I can put my full effort into.
Mhm.
So read as much as you can and like start to analyze books a little bit more critically and from like a craft perspective, to the point where you, not to the point where you like stop enjoying them, but
Yeah.
where you're able to like pinpoint, this is a specific genre that I really love to write in,
Mhm.
or subgenre, or this is like a particular structure that I really like, or I read this book and the way that they did first person was really engaging. Then think about like why that particular book worked so well for you.
Mhm.
And that kind of process of deconstruction really helps in order to figure out, like, if you're going to try and get into writing and do it as someone who's like writing to market or writing for a very specific audience with the hopes that you're just going to make bank,
Mhm.
then I don't think you're going to enjoy the process very much. So figure out the things that work for you and deconstruct the books that you love in order to
Mhm.
figure out, like, this is like the particular genre that I want to write in, or the structure, or the POV and tense and all those kinds of things, and figure out like, this is like my ideal book, and then just put everything you've got into it.
Mhm.
Um, but at the same time, don't go into it alone, in the sense that like writing is obviously very lonesome, where you're like, you know, just sitting on your butt at a computer, or like writing into a notebook or whatever, and
Mhm.
doing this like long periods of time where you're just on your own inside your own head.
Mhm.
But don't, try not to downplay the value and the magic that that community can bring to your life. So while you're writing, start to like branch out and
Mhm.
get onto social media, whichever platform and whichever level of like engagement and commitment is comfortable for you. But just try to start talking to people and finding your group, you know. And that's the kind of thing that could eventually lead to friendships. It can lead
Mhm.
to maybe like developing a writing critique group.
Mhm.
You know, you can find beta readers that way. There are just so many different opportunities for this kind of stuff, because I know far too many people who only started engaging in the community after they released their first book, and they're like,
Yeah.
why the hell didn't I do this before? You know. And I
Yes.
spent, you know, 2.5 years doing SFF Addicts and being part of the blogging community and the podcasting community and all that kind
Mhm.
of like the reading community, in order to kind of like immerse myself more in it and learn as much as I could, but
Yeah.
also start to develop really meaningful connections. And so it's like the main beta readers on Mushroom Blues, it was like Crystal Matar and MJ Kuhn,
Yeah.
you know, who are like, I've met both of them in person now. Like I just hung out with Crystal in Glasgow last August and had
Mhm.
like, we did like a road trip up the UK together, and
Wow.
it was a really, really wonderful time. And it's like, if I didn't do that, like there's this friendship that is meaningful in so many ways in terms of
Hmm.
like the support we give each other, everything that she did to help me like craft this book and put it out into the world, and
Hmm.
MJ too, and like her support with the podcast, co-hosting it with me. Those things wouldn't have been possible if I just didn't put myself out there a little bit more
Yeah.
every single day. So don't don't kind of downplay what that can mean, because
Hmm.
you and I wouldn't be talking right now if it wasn't
That's true.
for that, right?
Exactly. Talk to people. I mean,
Yeah.
that is easier said than done, I suppose.
But I
Um,
feel I am probably a bit biased because I'm quite a social person. Like,
Me too.
I do
I
have my
like talking.
moments of introversion, but I do like I host a podcast, so of course I
Yeah.
like to talk.
Wow. Yeah. I
But
talk to myself, to my camera
yeah,
most days.
so but it's all about comfort levels. Like, find your
Yeah.
comfort level, find out what kind of commitment you're able to manage on like a day-to-day basis. It doesn't even have to be every day. It's just like
Hmm.
a couple times a week, and replying to people, and you'd be surprised at like the authors you admire and how willing they are to reply to you or interact with you. So
100%. Yeah.
yeah,
Authors are people too, as
yeah.
as I like to say, and they're just as probably in some cases just as scared of you as you are of them.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I realize, like I witnessed this again in Glasgow for Worldcon, when
Hmm.
people that I've interviewed before and had plenty of interactions with,
Yeah.
seeing them in person, it's really different. Being able to like read their body language and understand like
Yep.
this person is comfortable presenting themselves in this way online,
Hmm.
or on camera, but when it comes to in person, it's
Hmm.
much different.
Yeah.
And so it really is like seeing your favorite authors online and whatever, and kind of like putting them up on a pedestal.
Hmm.
When you see them in person, you realize like, okay, this person gets anxious like I can, or this
Yeah.
person can, be like socially averse and whatever. Like,
Hmm.
these are the realities of just like human beings being human beings. And I think creating a celebrity around certain people, like, I'm glad that kind of veneer has gone away for me,
Yeah.
because that has also allowed me to develop good relationships with those people beyond just like, I love your books kind of thing.
I love you, man.
Yeah. It's like, that's too much. It's too much.
Yeah. But yeah, I was having this conversation with Matthew Ward, lovely gent. I've spoken to him a couple of times. He is traditionally published as well.
Hmm.
We were discussing Worldcon,
Yeah.
and I said, "Oh, I felt a little bit of FOMO not going, but at the same time, there was a part of me that was terrified of being with that many people for that length of time, just on the off chance, because I've spoken, like you said, I've spoken to a lot of people online,
Hmm.
but the idea of going up to people and being like, what happens if they don't actually like me in person? Or, like those little intrusive thoughts that we all
Yeah.
get. And Matthew was saying, yeah, he likes talking about his books and stuff, but not necessarily being on all the
Hmm.
time, because when you're in person, you have to be sociable.
Yeah. And it was like constant.
Yeah,
And I could just like track through my photos. It's just like, like this incredible high for like the first 3 days. And
yeah,
then by like
and
the
then
fourth and
done.
fifth day, it's like you can see me in my photos, and it's just like, God, I look so fucking tired.
Just slowly dying
Yeah,
on
yeah,
the
yeah.
inside.
And there were like certain occasions where it's like, I had a funny moment with Gareth Hanrahan on like,
Hmm.
I think like the evening of the fourth day. And I was just like, I was so burnt out. Like, I wasn't in the mood to talk to people. But then I saw Gareth, and I was just like, oh, hey man, like, we've interacted so much online. So it's
Yeah,
really nice to be able to hang out with him. But then we took a picture together, and I'm like, God, I look like ass. I just look so dead.
yeah.
But
I saw a lot of people tweeting like, "I'm so excited to be here, but it's the fourth day and I am
mhm,
so tired."
yeah, yeah.
you forget how much talking to people takes it out of you.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I
And
think after
I was
lockdown,
like, I was on 3 panels. I did a
mm,
signing at the Broken Binding booth.
and you were
I was
tattooing, weren't you?
and I was tattooing. Like I did
Yep.
3 tattoos while I was in Glasgow, and going to for drinks, going for dinners and lunches, going to parties and stuff like that. It was like
Yep. Full
constant
on.
from like 8 a.m. until 3 a.m. every day.
Hmm.
So,
What happens when you become a celebrity, Adrian? I'm sorry,
oh,
but
of course, of
it's just
course.
it's just the life. Lunches and
Oh,
dinners.
shush now, shush. Just going for lunches and dinners and blah blah
Go
blah.
for lunches and afternoon tea. It's very English. I mean, they're Scottish. I don't know what the Scottish equivalent is.
Don't know. It's like
Haggis,
haggis in the
probably.
afternoon.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Haggis and whiskey.
Yeah, an afternoon haggis. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
sounds
down
about
for
right.
that.
But it looked amazing, regardless. And
Yes, it was
there
very
was
fun.
there was part of me that was like, oh, I really wish I went, but at the same time, I was like, I'm kind of glad I didn't because I
Yeah,
like watching from the outside.
you got to live
Because I feel like,
vicariously through everyone.
yeah, and I feel like this is the first time that I have seen so much hype for
Hmm.
Worldcon.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a big convention, happens every year, pretty sure,
Hmm.
but it just bounces around the world. But for some reason, Glasgow popped off.
I'm gonna tell you right now, the UK crowd is like some of the coolest authors, bloggers, booksellers. Like hanging out with the people from the Broken Binding.
Oh, Matt's
I like
amazing.
I love you guys. Like they're so good, you know. And like the whole Broken Binding team is
Mm.
hilarious. And just like drinking wine with them until like 2 in the morning, you
No
know.
wonder you were so tired.
Uh, but I think the UK there's like a certain mentality that I've noticed from the UK authors where it's like
Mm.
there's a very strong work ethic, but then there's also like a very um, purposeful casualness about how
Mm-hmm.
they treat being an author, being
Yeah.
in the publishing industry. It's not like so serious all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like they know how to relax and like have really nice conversations,
Yeah.
and kind of like the the amicability of it is really beautiful. Whereas I'm from North America, so I know like how North Americans are, and
Mm-hmm.
especially in the States, it's like shit just gets like way too conflicted, way too political, way too fast a lot
Mm-hmm.
of the time. Where it's like I realize like I spent most of my time with folks from the UK
Mm-hmm.
while I was over there. Like Crystal aside, my friend Greta Kelly as well, Nick
Mm-hmm.
Eames came as well, but there were just like cliques because there are always cliques.
No matter where you
No
go.
matter where you go, no matter
Yep.
how old you are, there are always cliques. Life is forever high school.
Yeah.
But I'll see how it goes next year in Seattle
Yeah.
because I'm probably going to be going to that. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll see how it is with like
The
the the,
Americans.
the American vibe, like primarily American vibe.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I just felt like a very nice attitude and ambiance from the UK crowd. Like everyone's just like super happy to
Mm.
eat and drink and laugh and have good conversations. So
It's probably why we're happy. I mean,
yeah,
English people aren't
yeah.
British people as a whole. We're not renowned for being the happiest folk in the world.
Although I
But
found
it's if
The
there's food and
Scottish,
alcohol involved, we're
yeah,
fine.
yeah, yeah. Just repress all the sadness and let the,
That's what we that
yeah,
that is British.
yeah,
Stiff upper
yeah.
lip and all that. Very English that part.
Hmm.
We don't have
my
feelings.
my grandma's British, so I know how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't talk about feelings.
No,
We
don't
don't.
talk about it.
No. Which is why it's hilarious when me and my friend Lisa we run like
Hmm.
a book club really long thing on YouTube, and I take the mic because she is very feely. She cries at things, and I'm
Hmm.
like, why? She's northern as well, so it's like, but why? That's
You're
not
the
sad.
you're the perfect contrast.
Yes, she has feelings, and apparently I do not. So you
No,
know,
you do. They just exist in a void within your soul,
I think
deep
they're just
deep within your soul.
anger and hunger. Like they have no feelings. That's
Is it
it.
aren't those like the base emotions of like a lion or like some kind of wild animal?
I'll
I'm
take
just
it.
yeah, I'm just angry and hungry all the time, and sometimes I'm
Yeah.
hangry. So
Yes. And then
yeah,
that's when you run away.
right. Beautiful, Chels.
Exactly. But thank you so much for joining me
Oh,
today and having this conversation and
a
just
pleasure.
chatting
Thank you.
away. Would you like to promote yourself, where we can find you,
Sure.
and how we can find you? Just not your address, because that's
Yes,
a bit weird.
I don't want to dox myself. Don't worry. Well, you can go pick up Mushroom Blues
Yes.
in hardcover and paperback and ebook.
Mm-hmm.
And very soon, within like the next few weeks, the audiobook will be out.
Amazing.
So thank you all for being so patient. It's very good. And Imogen Church, who's an amazing narrator from the UK,
Mm-hmm.
just like knocked it out of the park. She did such a good job with it.
That's so cool.
So we got that, and you can check out my podcast, SFF Addicts,
Yes.
on any podcast platform, whatever your fancy.
Mm-hmm.
You can also catch it in video on YouTube, so just head over to the FanFi Addict YouTube channel to check that out. And then you can follow me at Adrian M Gibson pretty much everywhere. Twitter, X, whatever the hell you want to call it, Threads, Instagram and Twitter X are where I hang out the most.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can sign up for my newsletter on my website at www.adrianmgibson.com, and you can hear from me once a month as I get rambly and just talk about life and shit, and it's a good time.
Nice. That's what we love. We love a
Yeah,
good ramble.
yeah, just a solid ramble.
Love it. So, thank you very much to anyone who's watched live, or if you're watching
Thank you.
on the playback. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Adrian, for
Thank you so much,
taking
Chelsea.
time out of your day and scheduling around your power cut to come and talk to me.
We did it. We did it though. It
We
worked
did
out.
do it.
Yeah.
It's
It was
amazing.
fashionably late.
We were right on time.
Yes. Yeah. It's
You're
like
never late.
yeah. It's like we're gonna drop like a Lord of the Rings quote here, are we? Don't know.
You
Yeah.
can.
A good wizard is never late. So,
Good wizard is never late.
yeah.
And it's also a Princess Diaries quote as well, if you want to go millennial.
I just gotta drop that one of
Queen
my
is
books.
never late.
One of my
Everyone
books.
else is just early.
Yeah. A good mushroom is never late.
Exactly. We'll just amalgamate
Yes.
all of them.
just shove it all together.
Yeah, just mash it in. Fine. So thank you very much. Obviously this is available post. And we will see you whatever comes next.
Bye everybody.
Bye.
Bye.